What has modern archaeology to say about the creation of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, composed of some 2.3 million large blocks? When was it built? Was it really built by Khufu in the 26th century BC? Or is it a remnant of a long-lost, technologically advanced civilization? And how were those large, dense stones cut, then moved over long distances, and then lifted high up the pyramid, especially since the heaviest granite blocks weigh about 70 tons, and yet they were lifted 40 meters up to the roof of the king's chamber in the middle of the pyramid. In this lecture, I'll show you that the process of pyramid building was not instant, but instead was slowly perfected by trial and error. The pharaohs started out with simple mud brick tombs, then built a bunch of unstable failed pyramids, until they finally ended up with a working plan. Reliefs and paintings from Egypt show huge granite pillars being carried by boats. And we see a huge group of men dragging a massive statue on a sledge. And on top of this, we have since 2013 a daily log of an official who worked on the artificial lake system that allowed boats to close in on the pyramid from the Nile. And remarkably, the same official also describes carrying limestone from the quarries at Chura back to the pyramid in quick 2 or 3 day intervals. Khufu's name has also been found in and around the Great Pyramid. It was even graffitied on the heavy blocks above the king's chamber, likely by his work teams. And archaeologists have since also found the pyramid's worker town, revealing job titles to do with pyramid construction. And recently, carbon dating, based on nuclear physics, is also gaining accuracy, giving an independent way to date the wood and mortar from the pyramids. So we have a lot to get to. Let's start. We begin with a short history that led up to the building of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. During the first dynasty of Egypt, pharaohs were buried in simple mud brick tombs. Here, for instance, we see the tomb of Narmer from around 3100 BC. This was the great pharaoh who unified Egypt and founded the first dynasty. But as you can see, his tomb was very modest. Unfortunately, these early tombs were all robbed long ago, but seal impressions with Narmer's name were found at the site. Here we see the remains of the tomb of Den, a pharaoh whose reign started in 2970 BC. And this was the first tomb using red and black granite, which was used for the floor. And it was also the first tomb with stairs leading into it. And shockingly, the pharaoh was buried with 136 men and women, who seems to have been strangled to accompany him in the afterlife. Parallel to this development, some elites were buried in mastabas, which are mud brick rectangular tombs with inward sloping sides. And the first pyramid, the step pyramid, which we'll discuss shortly, simply seems to have been a number of those mastabas built on top of one another. Little is known about the second dynasty of Egypt, but the third one became spectacular. The first pharaoh of this dynasty was Djoser from the 27th century BC, and he became the first pyramid builder. It is commonly believed that this first pyramid was designed by Imhotep, the chancellor of the pharaoh, and also the high priest of the sun god Ra. And in fact, we have a statue base from the pyramid that reads, "The chancellor of the king of Lower Egypt, administrator of the great palace, hereditary lord, greatest of seers, Imhotep the builder, the sculptor, the maker of stone vases." So this names him as a builder, yet only during Greek times was he explicitly named as the architect of the first pyramid. The pyramid of Djoser still stands today and is a so-called step pyramid with an impressive height of 60 meters. It was also the first large project in Egypt where limestone was used as the primary building material. And underneath the pyramid we can find various shafts and also the king's burial chamber, which were carved below ground. A very impressive work. Stunningly, the burial chamber and the sarcophagus inside the pyramid were both made of granite, obtained from the quarries of Aswan, about 900 kilometers to the south. And, by the way, the pyramid doesn't stand alone in the desert. It was part of an entire walled courtyard, containing various buildings, some containing beautiful stone columns. The pharaoh Sneferu of the 26th century BC became the founder of the 4th dynasty, and he built not one, but 3 pyramids. The first one was the Maidum pyramid, which was so steep that it looks more like a tower than a pyramid. But further investigation showed that it was originally a 7-step pyramid, with much of it now under the rubble. Sneferu's second pyramid was the Bent pyramid, which likely started off too steep and then was adjusted halfway to a smaller angle. But even with this adjustment, it turned out to be unstable and was abandoned eventually. Sneferu's final pyramid was the Red pyramid, which also became his burial place. It is the first true pyramid, given its shape, and it reached an impressive height of 105 meters. And based on dates graffitied on some stones, we know that they were able to raise the pyramid by 10 to 12 meters in just 2 or 3 years. Sneferu's son, Khufu, also of the 26th century BC, was the greatest pyramid builder. He built the Great Pyramid of Giza, which contains, according to estimations, a stunning 2.3 million blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each, and reaching a height of 147 meters. Incredible! Inside the pyramid we find various passageways. Especially impressive is the Grand Gallery, with its tall, corbelled ceiling. It leads to the King's Chamber, the presumed burial place of Khufu, which was located 43 meters above ground level. The room of the king was not decorated, strangely, and it only contained a sarcophagus. Both the walls of this chamber and also the sarcophagus itself are made of those granite blocks from Aswan. And the heaviest blocks are in the extended roof above the king's chamber, with some of those blocks weighing up to 70 tons. In the upper chamber of the roof, the builders of Khufu left a graffiti stating "Friends of Khufu," with here the cartouche of Khufu, containing 2 birds, a snake and a sun. And there also are multiple graffiti of 2 building teams who compounded their team names with 2 of the multiple names of Khufu. And now the following. Some theories go around claiming that the Great Pyramid is much older. Some believe tens of thousands of years older, and was created by some long-lost, technologically advanced civilization. So what makes mainstream archaeologists relatively confident at dating the pyramids to the time of Khufu? Well, first, as mentioned, Khufu's name was graffitied by his workers' team on various blocks above the king's chamber. And there are also 2 boat pits near the pyramids, which also contain the cartouche of Khufu and also his sun on various stones. Secondly, his name is also mentioned various times on the Wadi al-Jarf papyri that I discussed at length in the previous lecture. These papyri include a log by an inspector named Merer, who explicitly documents going back and forth from 2 quarries at Tura to the pyramid. On top of this comes radiocarbon dating, which is getting more and more accurate over the years. Unfortunately, the stone blocks of the pyramid can't be dated, but the mortar used for pyramid construction can, as it includes ashes from fires. And this gives us dates between 2620 and 2484 BC in a recent analysis, overlapping Khufu's life. Some wood from the Queen's Chamber has been dated between 3300 and 3100 BC, which is 500 years before Khufu, but still not thousands of years earlier. And by the way, these errors are common when dating wood, since the wood might have come from the center of a long-lived tree, or it might have been recycled wood, causing the earlier dates. Another line of reasoning is to actually look for evidence of a supposed early technological civilization in Egypt that might have built the pyramids. So how do we do this? Well, Egypt's history is quite well documented. We have Acheulean tools used by Homo erectus, even before Homo sapiens, from between 400 and 300,000 years ago. And there are also even older Aldewan tools, although these are tough to date. Then over the millennia we have evidence of Homo sapiens who formed nomadic hunter-gatherer cultures. For instance, the Kormusan industry from between 42 and 32,000 years ago. And then cultures appeared that settled for parts of the year, that weren't fully nomadic anymore, with some of them, for instance the Sibyllian culture between 15 and 13,000 years ago, gathering undomesticated grains, a precursor to agriculture. Then agriculture is introduced around 6000 BC, showing evidence of domesticated crops and also a lot of pottery, from a whole list of cultures in various parts of Egypt. And with all this material there, from before the first dynasty of Egypt, and also perfectly in order from primitive to more advanced, it is tough to include a lost civilization anywhere. And since we have hundreds of thousands of objects from all these earlier cultures, where is all the stuff from that lost civilization? Then comes the line of reasoning discussed earlier. Namely that the Great Pyramid of Khufu was preceded by simple pits, then mastabas, then a step pyramid, then some failed pyramids, then the first true pyramid, the Red Pyramid, and only then Khufu's pyramid, with also a clear progression from simple to more advanced. And by the way, in 2010 the step pyramid was also dated, using short-lived plant samples, as expected, to the 27th century BC. Some later documents also link Khufu to the pyramid. A stela of Amenhotep II, for instance, from the 15th century BC, tells us that this pharaoh went, quote, looking at the beauty of the sanctuary of Khufu and Khafra, of course referring to the two great pyramids. And Herodotus, the great Greek historian, links the Great Pyramid to Cheops, which is the Greek name for Khufu. We read, this Cheops, the Egyptian said, reigned 50 years, and after he was dead, his brother Khephren succeeded to the kingdom. This king followed the same manner as the other, in that he made a pyramid, not indeed attaining the measurements of that which was built by the former, that is, by Cheops, which is to say, Khepren's pyramid was smaller, and then he notes, this I know, having myself measured it. And now we finally come to the many questions about pyramid construction. How did they cut these heavy blocks? How did they move them? And how were some blocks lifted all the way to the top of the pyramid? Let's start with the cutting of the blocks. The making of the blocks is decently understood. The Egyptians had copper saws and they were used to cut the stone. And this may sound a bit strange since copper is itself too weak to cut stone. But then quartz sand is added, and this sand does the actual cutting. And this was confirmed since in some cases, a mixture of quartz and green copper oxide was found in these cuts. To some, this solution just seems improbable. It can't be that simple, but a YouTube search shows it can be easily replicated, even for hard granite rock. Here, for instance, we see a fragment from the 2006 documentary called Naked Science: Pyramids. This process did require a lot of copper, since for about 3 centimeters of cutting, you lose about 1 centimeter of copper when cutting granite. And this might explain why there were long chains of ovens in Sinai, close to a number of copper mines. And these lines of ovens have a total length of 3 kilometers. And by the way, Inspector Merer on the Wadi al-Jarf papyri also names various copper tools that he shipped from Sinai. Drills are also visible in Egyptian artwork, and drilling a hole in even granite has also been shown to be possible experimentally, as you can see here. A technique to split a rock in two was to drill holes and then hammer wooden pegs into them, and then let those pegs expand by absorbing water. allowing the rock to split neatly along that line of pegs. But what about moving the blocks? We have direct evidence of how this happened from a wall painting in the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep. Here we see a massive statue moved on a sledge, pulled by an enormous amount of people. And notice here also a figure on the tip of the sledge pouring water on the sandy floor, which according to modern experiments reduces friction by half. And by the way, there's also a fantastic video online by Wally Wallington, what a name, who moved and even lifts a 10-ton block all by himself using some simple but clever lever systems. Most of the distance, however, the stones of the pyramid were carried by boats along the Nile. We have direct evidence of this from a relief from the pyramid complex of Yunus in Saqqara. Here we see two palm-shaped granite columns being transported on a boat, each of which are said to be 20 cubits or just over 10 meters long. And this would give these columns an estimated weight of 38 tons each, so 76 tons in total. And now the mystery of how these stones were lifted upward. Various pyramids show evidence of ramps. Now obviously these ramps had to be quite long to reach high up the pyramid without too large of an incline. These ramps, by the way, were already mentioned in Greek times. Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC writes, "And it said the stone was transported a great distance, and that the edifices were raised, utilizing earthen ramps, since machines for lifting had not yet been invented in those days. And most surprising it is that no trace remains of these ramps, so that it seems not the result of the patient labor of men, but rather as if the whole complex were set down entire upon the surrounding sand by some god." So the Greeks too were mesmerized by this insane monument. It is now generally believed that the Pyramid of Khufu had two ramps, one coming from that artificial harbor to lift the blocks that were brought by boat from afar, such as the high-quality limestone from Chura and also the granite from Aswan, and another ramp coming from a nearby quarry from which the rougher core stones were taken. And indeed remains of these ramps have been discovered, made from two walls of broken limestone set in clay mortar and with the area in between filled with sand and gypsum. Finally, we look for evidence of the complicated organization required for such a humongous operation. Since 2013, as discussed in the previous lecture, we have papyri that date to the time of Khufu that record the daily activities of a minor official named Merer and his crew. And he gives us a first-hand account of the artificial waterways that connected the pyramid to the Nile. His team was part of a 600-man operation to release a dam at the quote, entrance of the Lake of Khufu, as it was called, and this was likely done to fill up these waterways to the pyramid. And then we read that his team goes back and forth to the Chura quarry by boat in 2 or 3 day round trips to move limestone to the quote, horizon of Khufu, meaning to the pyramid. Given that we've already seen that 75 tons could be taken aboard a ship, and given an average weight of 2.5 tons per block of limestone, this would mean about 30 stones could be shipped every 2 to 3 days per group. And with about 70,000 blocks needed for the outer casing that was quarried from Chura, and assuming that only the 15 groups mentioned in the papyri worked at this, the outer casing could be completed in little over a year. And at this rate, the whole pyramid could be completed in 35 years, with only those 15 teams. But given that most stones came from a much closer quarry, very close to the pyramid, and assuming that many more than 15 groups worked on the project, it is not at all impossible that the project could be finished during the 3 to 5 decades of Khufu's life. We'll end with the following. Close to the pyramids, archaeologists have also found a huge workers' town called Hayt al-Ghurab. containing houses, workshops, bakeries, barracks, grain storages and more. The town has been dated to Khafre, the son of Khufu, who was also the builder of the second largest pyramid at Giza, but there is also evidence of another older layer, possibly dating to Khufu himself. And on the hillside next to Hayt al-Ghurab, we can find the town's cemetery, and there we find various titles to do with pyramid construction, such as Overseer of the site of the pyramid, Director of the draftsman, Overseer of masonry, Director of workers, and Inspector of the craftsmen. So there we have it, what we know thus far of the remarkable achievement of the building of the pyramid of Khufu. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are inspired. And if you want to know more about Egyptian history or any other topic from world history, then read my book In Search of the Sublime. You can read it completely for free on worldhistorybook.com, or you can buy a physical copy on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.